Welcome, everybody, to Run, Walk, Talk Tales of Inclusion and Development. I'm Judy, and my pronouns are she and her. And I'm here with Steph, and her pronouns are she and her. And today we are very excited to welcome two special guests to our podcast, Meredith and Maggie, who are the founders of Leona. And in their first, I think it was your first chat together, you sort of discovered that you shared a business idea. You both had the same one, which I think is so exciting. And it was that, what if there was some service or someone who could provide expecting parents with coverage and support and really a deeper and broader holistic care? And so we're going to dig into that today. But before we do, I'm going to hand it over to Steph, who's going to give us a bit more of an introduction on the two of you.
Yeah, thanks, Judy. So Maggie, so this is always the time where we talk about, our special guests, right? And so Maggie, first and foremost, is a mom. She spends her day with her heart outside of her body, and she does this best with also managing a home, mapping out memory-making moments, which I love that statement, and keeping her son at the center of the why. She is a career marketer with experience both with brand teams and digital agencies. In 2022, she made the leap to entrepreneurship and founded Watering Can LLC, where she focuses on social media management, community management, digital strategy, and account management, supporting her amazing client partners. So thank you. Meredith, she is a proud dog mom, yay for dog moms, Philly native, and 2 times founder. She is a recommender of good books, which we'll get to, movies, and vegan restaurants. She is a fan who loudly and repeatedly yells shoot during hockey games, which we also really love too. And what does she do? She makes systems better, provides intentional care for parents and teams impacted by parental leave. Together, she says, we can prevent burnout, attract the best talent, and ensure above else that the parent feels supported and at ease, which is really great. So Maggie and Meredith, welcome. We're going to jump in. I'm going to hand it back to Judy.
Well, no, absolutely. And you're both located in the US, and I think it's really interesting to talk about some of the cultural attitudes toward parental leave. I think there's definitely differences in the US and in Canada. And so I think it would be interesting for us to hear more about, what have you seen in the USA in terms of the US in terms of cultural differences?
Yeah, great question. And first of all, thank you so much for having us. We're very excited to be here. And one of the reasons we're excited is to talk about the differences, right, between the US and other parts of the world. As you may or may not know, unfortunately, the US is one of the only developed countries that doesn't have a federal paid leave policy. Right now, it's just up to the individual states. I'm in Pennsylvania, Maggie's in New York. Here in PA, we're actually working really hard to push forward the first paid leave policy in the state. And so it's really frustrating to not have that federal leave policy. And I think that really filters down into how Americans view paid leave. Unfortunately, there is a negative connotation towards it, especially for non-parents. They might see paid leave as a vacation. We hear that a lot, both from parents who have gone on leave. They heard their coworkers call it a vacation. Or as we've been posting on LinkedIn, people have been commenting like, this is just a vacation. Why is it important? And so that's one of the reasons we founded Leona, is to change that conversation, to change the culture one company at a time, because we do think it's so crucial to support parents in their journey, especially if they're new parents or birthing parents, to make sure that they're surrounded by empathy and support in the workplace.
Wow, thank you. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your organization. And I mean, it's always been important to focus on parental leave, but what is it in 2025 that really has you, doing this and starting your company now?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I think going back to the really quick reference of our origin story, Meredith and I both kind of stumbled upon like this obvious thing to us. It felt very obvious that the system isn't working, and like maybe there's a way we can serve the people at the heart of this like problematic experience, and we can like harness the opportunity to make it better, right? And to actually create meaningful change for people. And so knowing that the parental leave system is just very broken in the United States, we think that there's an opportunity for companies to make meaningful change in that process. I think the environment politically and looking at legislation and different political initiatives, that's like a very long, slow journey to create change. We believe in the power of like advocating in that space. But if we're just random people sitting back in our homes, looking at like, what can we do?
Yeah.
I think there's just an interesting power in saying we can go to our employers. Like our politicians, yes, we want them to hear from us, but like our employers have power to create environments in which people feel cared for and seen. And in the United States right now, unfortunately, there's a lot of unease about security and the future. And so we think the right companies who want to show up for their employees can capture this moment and say, we're going to be a part of proactive security for these working families. And so all of this back to Leona and kind of like what Leona is about and how we want to serve companies. So we really want to fix the broken system. We don't want to improve conditions. So there's a lot of organizations currently today that will say, parental leave is a really sticky point for us. Let's hire a coach, or let's get some templates to help us plan before the leave. There's a lot of like good efforts happening that we see in the landscape. However, what we want to do is solve the problem and not necessarily plug holes. So we want to come into an organization environment and we want to show up for the parent and the team through providing support in 3 phases. The first phase being before the leave, the second phase being providing coverage during the leave while the parent is bonding with their new child and healing, and the third phase being reintegration back into the workplace. And what we found is that there's a lot of place to both drive output and productivity of the work in each section of this overall framework, but also there's this element of creating the empathy and bridging some real compassion within a culture of a workplace that kind of speaks to that larger element of cultural attitude that we have in the United States. So we're really thinking that like this is a way that we can try something new and different that doesn't just plug the hole. It really does say, let's wipe the slate clean and try something that we haven't seen happen before. And we're really excited at the opportunity to find companies that also want to be innovative, forward thinking, and find a way to jump into that and say, sure, why not? Let's try it.
Well, I mean, it seems like it should be a competitive advantage for these companies to be offering a service like this. And in thinking back to Meredith, what you were describing, I mean, it's a bit baffling to me that people would think that you're going on parental leave and it's a vacation. I'm like, I'm also a dog mom, and so but I still understand that it is not a vacation. It's an extremely difficult time of adjustment, and there's lots going on. So, Maggie, it sounds like in the phases you're working with organizations to help people within the organization get a sense of what that parental leave is going to be like. Like what, I'm just curious, like what sort of pushback are you hearing besides that sort of notion that it's a vacation time? It's anything but, right? Like
Exactly. And I'll definitely want to hear Meredith's thought on this too, but my initial answer to that is that I just don't think there's space being provided for anyone to actually think about it. I think it's such a large, like this question could be answered a number of ways, right? Because especially if you're a birthing mother and a woman, you have this child and suddenly the world is all about your child and they forget about you, right? When your pregnancy, it was just about you and how are you feeling and what do you want to eat? And so there's this shift internally as a birthing mother who also is looking at her career and navigating all of this nuance of her identity, her body. I mean, it's incredibly transformative and it's not a light switch moment. So for companies and environments of teams to understand that this is not a light switch and to like understand what the empathy, I know the word empathy is thrown around there, but truly what is happening to that person? Are they getting enough sleep? Is their work looking like not their top performance, and why do you think that is right now? And how can I help that new parent, right? Is there postpartum? Is that person feeling seen? I just think there's a bridge for a lot of really like heart forward care that I think everyone, at least in the United States, having children right now, like there's such a need for improvement, and I think this is one way.
Yeah, and I would just love to add, we really emphasize companies being proactive rather than reactive when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to
Yeah.
parental leave, because a lot of times they just wait until the employee tells them they're going on parental leave and then they're scrambling to come up with a plan. Often they have the parent come up with their own plan when they're already trying to juggle all these different transitions. And so that's why at Leona, part of our framework, which is really the first of its kind framework of coming up with a holistic approach to parental leave,
Yeah.
is being proactive, planning before the parent even goes on leave. We onboard with the team before the parent goes on leave so that we can come up with different timelines, because we've had the baby come early. Babies don't care about project timelines, so we want to be prepared for when that might happen. There could be a medical emergency. So just coming up with different scenarios and just being as prepared as possible. And that way the team feels secure, the parent feels secure, and it's good for the company's bottom line because they're not scrambling at the last second to try to prevent something that they could have planned for in advance.
I I think it's so smart how you have that like that holistic sort of picture, right? That, the before, the during, and the after, and the coming back. And it really, it amazes me that there's not more companies sort of doing this, right? Because the benefit is huge. And I really appreciate the sort of your comment around the parental leave. Like it sounds like you're expanding not just sort of for birthing mothers. I think you also, for adoption. So that's really great that you're
Yeah, and
looking at that.
hopefully someday more fathers too, because
That's right.
I don't know the data around Canadian, partners who are non-birthing, but in the United States, we have policies in some places, and
Yeah,
men especially will just not take advantage of them. And the
that's
allyship
right.
of more men taking their own paternity leaves, both
Yes.
to support their partner and also to support the new child and that bonding, like that would be chef's kiss, another topic for another day. But our hope is that we're starting with this emphasis on who we identify need the most help, which are birthing mothers, but
That's
it
right.
is an inclusive framework, and we are wanting to make sure that that's really clear from the get-go so that we can build that world and work on it one step at a time.
That's great.
Well, and I think that really segues nicely into the next question, which is, what are some unique benefits or resources that your company provides in addition to parental leave? So what sort of services do you offer?
Yeah, so we both have lots of thoughts about this one, but one of the reasons we spent 8 months building Leona before we even publicly launched it, and one of the reasons it took that amount of time is because we really concentrated on the community that we were building, because we only addressed one very small piece of the parental leave puzzle in terms of planning and coverage. But there's so many other different facets to it. There's all the regulatory and compliance paperwork, right? Which is even more complicated because it's up to individual states. So there's no one size fits all framework. Every single state is different. And because we work nationally across the US with remote companies, that paperwork can be a huge hassle. But Maggie and I don't have the expertise in that. So before we even launched, we were very considerate in terms of making sure that we had that support for our clients if they wanted it. So we have built numerous partnerships, one of which is with a company called Cocoon that helps with that regulatory and compliance management. And so we can certainly talk about other partners. I'll hand it off to Maggie, but we really wanted to just emphasize that we're here for the entire company, the entire team, the parents, and their coworkers in all aspects of parental leave. While we are doing the work in terms of coverage and planning, like I said, we care about your mental health. We care about compliance. So just making sure all of those things are addressed.
Yeah, and the only thing I would really add to that is, when we looked at each phase with a fine-tooth comb and said, what is the team experiencing and what is the expecting parent or the new parent experiencing? That that practice has informed where are our opportunities for Leona to say, let's bring in an empathy training before the new parent comes back so that the team has a sense of a personal development, mental health, broader awareness of what this is like so that it helps when the reintegration happens in phase 3. And things like that linger, right? Everything we're doing, it's through the framework of parental leave as the catalyst. But when we talk to employers about what we're trying to do is we're really trying to like hit the bottom line of how they keep their people and attract the best people. And we can only do that if we're working in community because as Meredith said, like we have our one branch of the tree that like we feel like is solid and there, but we want to really like cover things with people that we trust who are also innovative and dreaming big and trying to change things because change doesn't happen in a silo. And so we believe that if we succeed and when we succeed as a company, it will be because of that community mindset and the element of like everyone has a way to impact this. And we need to do it together in mutual beneficiary ways. So
Well, and thank you for that. And I think too, correct me if I'm wrong, the integration sometimes in the US is it's quite short, right? So you're coming back to work in sometimes within 2 to 3 months. Is that or sometimes less than that?
oh my gosh.
That's generous.
Oh,
Yes.
wow.
One out of 4 moms come back after 2 weeks.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Which is horrific. And that's
Yeah.
one of the things that we want to change. And that's why we really want to work with those progressive, empathetic companies because we don't want to work with companies that make the mom, especially if it's a birthing mom or if like she had a cesarean and she's
right.
literally still recovering. We don't want to work with a company that forces her to come back after 2 weeks. So that's part of our dialogue, both on social media, just getting the word out about Leona, but as well as dialogue with potential clients, is that this is like one of our core values is making sure that they have 2 or 3 months or preferably more to be able to reintegrate back because it's such a huge adjustment.
And that shock value of like seeing the way that the two of you just reacted to that, like I'm going back to that all the time because we just believe what's normal in the United States doesn't mean it's okay. And we
That's right.
constantly are looking at other progressive similar nations across the planet where that is not working. Like nobody's doing what we're doing and they're doing so much better. And like it should be shocking. And I think it's a great reminder that like us hoping to work with organizations who offer 12 weeks, that shouldn't be generous. That should still be like okay, you know,
Yeah.
and unfortunately we're just not quite there yet. And so we are grateful for that like real shock a moment because it just speaks to the power of why it's necessary change.
Well, and even just a quick personal story. I mean, in Canada, typically birthing parents will take sort of a year, right? We get a year off. And when I had my daughter, naturally no complications and things like that. And I went back after a year. And I very much thought of women in the US and parents in the US, you know, after that sort of month or even a few weeks thinking, oh my goodness, I don't think my daughter didn't sleep for the first year and a half. So I can't imagine. So
It's really a current disservice and
Yeah.
we're really, you know, thank you for sharing your personal connection and reaction because it's part of like the heart of all of why we're like, this isn't working. We need to get loud and
Yeah.
say really clearly that we need more companies to step up and normalize better standards.
That's right. That's right. We're coming to the last question that we like to ask our guests, and we talk about this. What are you both reading or listening to, and why? What should we be listening or reading to, or reading?
Yeah, I'll go first, I guess. I've been trying to do more podcast listening whenever I can. I feel like it's an easier practice for me than picking up a book, but I wish I were a better like avid reader. So that's another little thing for someday. Someday I'll make more time for reading. But the podcast that I've been listening to lately that I've really loved is 10% Happier with Dan Harris.
Yes, it's a
I
good
think
one.
it's just such an incredible, eclectic
Mhm.
podcast. And I think sometimes you really have to like the topic of a certain podcast host or the theme that they have. And Dan Harris is just so incredibly, I think, inclusive to different types of conversations, and the guests are always enlightening, and I just always feel better about myself when I listen to it, both from a thought-provoking place but also just like a mental health place. So highly recommend.
Great. Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, and I'm the prolific reader at Leona, so I mainly read nonfiction and romance for when the world gets too heavy, as it often does. So the latest nonfiction that I read was Persist by Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren is kind of our North Star at Leona in terms of policy and fighting for the underdog and just making sure that everyone is heard and seen. But then a romance that I recently read and loved is called P.S. I Hate You by Lauren Connolly. And it's the only book I've read that as soon as I finished it, I went back and reread it. That's how good it was. So I highly recommend that one too.
Okay. Well, both of you, thank you so much on behalf of Judy and myself. Really, this was such a great conversation. We learned a lot. We'll make sure to post the links to Leona and any other links you want to share with us. But until next time, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.